attackers are constantly looking for ways to breach networks, to breach data. And so really cybersecurity encompasses everything around protection of those. And it's so important, regardless of what industry you're in or business size that you are, that you're keeping an eye on how you're protecting digital assets and your digital footprint.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Brittany Kneller, and I'm CRI's Content Marketing Specialist. Today's session actually finishes off our webinar series for the month, Experts in Cybersecurity. I'd like to introduce you to our Director of Cybersecurity, Leo Cuellar.
I'm the Director of our Cybersecurity practice here at CRI, and I have over 25 years in cybersecurity across multiple industries in a variety of organizations from small to huge, such as Nike, Starbucks, etc. Here at CRI, we're looking to enable businesses to use cybersecurity to secure their data by providing them with expertise such as interim and virtual CISO and leadership for their teams.
Thank you, Leo. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Dan DeCloss.
Yeah, founder and CEO of PlexTrac, a cybersecurity platform related to tracking and managing vulnerabilities and risks and having a holistic view of your security posture. But I come from security space as well. I've been in the industry for my entire career, which is going on 16 years now. And I started in the Department of Defense and wore a lot of hats as I kind of grew through incident response, vulnerability management, and then narrowed in on penetration testing. And then most recently was the security director here at Sensi in Idaho, in Meridian, before I quit my day job and launched the company full time.
So what is your definition of cybersecurity, and why is cybersecurity so important?
Yeah, so I define cybersecurity to be the practices and implementation of protection of digital assets, right? We live in a digital world, and so everything composed of the digital footprint that we leave as a business, as consumers, are all related to the protection around that, and so it's important because everything is online today. Even if we as individuals don't have as much of an online presence or do things in more of a traditional or manual perspective, behind the scenes and anybody that we're interacting with are constantly looking for ways to breach networks, to breach data. And so really cybersecurity encompasses everything around protection of those. And it's so important, regardless of what industry you're in or business size that you are, that you're keeping an eye on how you're protecting digital assets and your digital footprint.
In your opinion, what are the biggest threats to businesses?
Yeah, so I think the biggest threats, it kind of comes down to, I think, twofold, right? The first, which is I would say probably the most important, is truly not having a perspective of what you should be doing in terms of your cybersecurity program and how you're addressing cybersecurity. Ignorance is not bliss in our industry. And so lots of organizations that are in that, what I would put in that small to mid-sized business category, probably have the perspective that things are not going to happen to me or don't even know where to get started in cybersecurity, and so put it on the back burner or leave it for another day. And so I think that's one of the biggest risks that an organization faces today. And then, coinciding with that, I think ransomware definitely continues to be one of the biggest threats, which is very real time, and it exposes directly why cybersecurity should be an important focus for your organization, because it emulates exactly the types of attacks and techniques that a normal, or not a normal, an advanced adversary might conduct, right? Where in an advanced breach or in an advanced attack, those exercises are going to take months, and it will take months more to have the organization even identify it, if at all. Whereas ransomware is very immediate, right? It's like, hey, right now is when our data is getting encrypted, and we cannot operate as a business or as individuals, right? So I think that's a very big threat, but it exposes the lack of planning or just the lack of preparedness for a cybersecurity program in general.
Well, I mean, mine is similar, and we've talked a little bit before in the sense of there's this evolution of hacking, and in the last couple of years, that evolution has been that hacking is now a business. Before, it really was like a threat of like, you would have these really creative guys, and it's like, okay, they were in there for either malicious or, whatever reason they were in there. But nowadays, in the last couple of, literally, I think the last couple of years, it's become much more organized. There are literal businesses. So hacking as a business is a big thing. These guys are really looking into it for the money, and I think ransomware is a really good illustration that, before they might have locked you out and, it's like, I don't want to say giggles or whatever, but now they're asking for money and they're looking to be paid quite a bit and they're in it for the money. Once these guys are in it for the money, they're going to go after the low-hanging fruits, the guys that they feel like they can pull the most amount of money out of. And really, unfortunately, that is the small to medium-sized businesses. Smaller companies don't have the resources or the budget to actually maintain a full-time security presence. Your normal security team can consist of, I'll say 2 to 5 people. That's a really huge budget on just the people resources. Not even talking about the resources they might need for tools and et cetera that goes with it. A lot of companies can't afford that. So there's this, when you're looking at it from a business, looking at who is your target, how are you going to get money from them, really, that low-hanging fruit of small businesses is huge, because they're also in denial that, who's going to go after them. So for them, they're a natural target for the hacking companies.
What I was kind of alluding to, and like, what are some of the biggest threats is like, when organizations don't have a plan in place, that's like your biggest threat, right? The failure to plan for anything related to cybersecurity and your posture and how you're going to protect yourselves or your organization is a big issue. And when I was the director out at Sensi, where our approach was, hey, we're going to focus 70% of our time on these legacy issues that we have in the organization, which is going to be present in any organization. What are the things that we really need to shore up that are just some of those, what we would call those daily hygiene items and the fundamentals? We're going to focus 70% of our time on those as we come out of the gate, and then 30% of the time is going to be focused on the new things, being proactive, identifying what new business initiatives are happening, what are the new projects that are coming down the pike that we need to be aware of, and making sure that security is built into those programs and into those products, so that it doesn't become a legacy issue that we have to deal with on the back end, right? And so that was very effective as we started getting off the ground. And since I've left, I know that they're continuing to do a great job there. But one of the things that we also focused on was having that proactive mindset, saying, doing that threat modeling and saying, like, where would our biggest threats be? How would we respond to a ransomware attack? And doing tabletop exercises. And we started with tabletop exercises, and it was truly just a paper exercise, right? Hey, we just got an alert from the SIM. Now what do we do? Right? And being able to prepare and talk through those types of issues, so that you're also prepared when or if those events happen in real world. So
but once a quarter, they should basically say, we have been hacked. You guys tell me what you're going to do. And if the answer comes back like they're all blank, and they don't know what they're doing, then you got a problem. And that is a realistic problem and a very realistic scenario to run through.
Important piece of like the concept of what are your crown jewels. Intellectual property is definitely going to be a target, right? So making sure that you've highlighted how you're protecting your intellectual property, even when it's something that you might not consider as relevant of a target, right? It's not like a database, no, it's our code base, right? Or it's the secret formula for whatever, the Coke formula or something like that, right? So right. KFC's crispy chicken recipe, right? So I think those are always important aspects, when we're talking about these stories, because it highlights what people, that attackers are creative, right? And it's while a lot of times, especially on the ransomware front, it's all about the money, but the other things is like, hey, if I go steal this, they'll probably pay me a lot of money too to get it back, or things like that. So those extortion campaigns as well.
And Dan, I do have another side story you just reminded me that's really important about, crown jewels. So there was a company that I worked for that one I can't talk too much about. But our team, we had a big security team that we worked for, and we spent a lot of time and resources guarding this intellectual property. And we set up segregation, access controls, identity management, the whole 9 yards, right? And at the end of the day, one of the things that happened was one of our guys was talking to a line manager about this intellectual property, and telling them like, hey, you got to do these procedures because we need to guard this IP, right? And the guy just kind of looked at our guy, and he was like, well, what are you talking about? And it's like, we have a folder, and if a client asks for it, we'll copy and give them a copy of it, right? And we're like, I'm sorry, what? He said, yeah, it's like, it's sensitive information, but we want our customers to have it. We are not going to distribute it, but if they ask for it, we'll give it to them, right? And we're just like, we just spend a good chunk of our money protecting this, right? And then that really kind of scrambled internally to figure out, well, wait a minute, guys, what is, because we were like, hey, this is all what the security team considers digital critical asset, right? And we went to our CFO, and he kind of agreed, and he was like, yeah, it's considered sensitive. And then we went to the line manager, and they're like, no, it's not. And we're like, oh my God, across the board, there was a whole misunderstanding of what was sensitive and what was not, and what was critical to the business.
That's scary.
So,
yeah.
That was a very critical lesson learned in my career field, because after that, I learned very much to go through that process, but it has to go through all the organizations, because if everybody in the company doesn't consider it sensitive, you're going to have some major security and procedural gaps.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been alluding to it all along, but what do you think a small business should prioritize when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think that's a great, obviously a great question. And we mentioned it before. I think the first thing and foremost is definitely starting to have a plan. If the adage that you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and just starting getting an idea of what should we be doing from a cybersecurity perspective. There's lots of frameworks out there to help people get started, but you really need to start with that plan. And I think that also is in tandem with a proactive mindset. I come from the proactive assessment space, being a penetration tester and trying to get ahead of the attackers in some respect. So I think that when you're just getting started, that's a good perspective to have is what are the proactive assessment type things that we can do, and the proactive controls that we can start putting in place in order to prevent some of these attacks. But having that plan in place and starting to develop the processes and the policies around that proactive nature, I think are really important. And then I think it's also important, like Leo alluded to as well, that you need to assume that you are breached, right? It's not a matter of if, it's when, and likely you probably already are or have been, and you just didn't know it. And so how do you go about identifying where would we be breached, and where are our major threat vectors? But all in all, it's easy to be overwhelmed, and so that's why people start to get into that mindset of, I'm just not going to do anything because I'm probably screwed already, right? But actually taking those small steps, starting to get that plan in place, starting to test against it, starting to communicate that across the organization. Those are all some of the small things that an organization can do to get started and prioritize. Even if you're a larger organization or you have a security program already in place, coming back to the basics and keeping those things simple and small are going to pay in dividends. Not getting hung around the axle, and truly asking yourself first, what problem are we trying to solve? Don't go to a vendor and just say, hey, what am I supposed to do, and let the vendor dictate to you, because of course they're to sell you product and make money. So, and may not have your best interest from the security program perspective at heart. So starting with, what problem am I trying to solve, and where are our major gaps? And that starts with those assessments and those early frameworks to say, here are the things that we know are the fundamentals that we should be doing. And then from there, starting to then look into where you invest in products or services to help augment those gaps, right? So I mean, that would be my kind of initial approach,
Yeah.
you know, and obviously one that we took at Sensei as well. So.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, so another question here. What are your thoughts on multi-factor authentication?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the question because it's like I like it everywhere, right? You know, and I think, you know, and I think for folks that may not recognize what the forms of multi-factor authentication are, you know, it comes down to like something that you are, something that you know, and something that you have, right? And so I think all of us are aware of like, you know, using our fingerprint now or some biometric identification. That's one factor of authentication, tied with something like a PIN or something that you have, so a token. And I think it's important to always continue to recognize what we mean when we say multi-factor authentication, because it actually is two forms of it and not just one. And so, but definitely a big fan. You know, I think that you know it prevents a lot of the target of opportunity attacks out there. I think I don't know if we mentioned it yet, but you know, you're kind of in one of two camps in this. Well, you're in both camps. You can be in both camps, but you're either a target of opportunity where, hey, we left the front door open and someone just happened to be walking by and decided to come in and steal all of our stuff, right? That's the target of opportunity. Whereas there's the target of choice where it's like, hey, I really want to hack this group. And so, you know, making sure that you're out of that target of opportunity. Multi-factor authentication plays an important role in that, because people are spraying passwords all over the place to websites and things like that, and say one of them actually lands and they can actually authenticate with the password, they would still need a second form of authentication. So that's either that token or that the biometric identification mechanism. So those are, I think it's an extremely important thing that, you know, it's easy to kind of overlook because a lot of us are just so used to doing it now. But a lot of organizations are not doing it, and it adds some time to how you get into services and things like that. So I can understand some of the potential pushback, but not in this day and age. I think there's definitely ways to continue to enforce that, and I just obviously recommend enforcing it wherever you can.
You know, I don't hear or see about it very much, but Dan, and I think you may have run into this, is the education for the employees as well as people across the board when it comes to two-factor. I mean, a couple of years ago, I mean, I heard a lot of pushback of like, no, you know, it's like doing my fingerprint. Oh my God, you're going to take my fingerprint. The government's going to have my fingerprint. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. It's like, do you actually know how biometric works? It's like when you put your finger on, you know, whatever is taking your finger, it's literally not taking a picture of your fingerprint. It's literally like just associating points, looking at like how many points keep showing up on your finger. And it's like the little swirl is a point, the X is a point. So they can't replicate a fingerprint from a fingerprint scan, right? It's just a number of points, you know. And then when the technology, when they scan it, basically it's set up to say how many of these points match up before they say, yeah, it's accepted. So have you ever done your fingerprint where it says not accepted, and then all of a sudden it's accepted? It's like, that's what it's doing. It's assigning the points, and it's saying, hey, 9 out of 18 matched. It's like, no, you need 12. Do it again. Okay, you know, 10 out of 18. Okay, 12 out of 18. Okay, now you're good. So, and that goes the same thing for like retina and face. They're not taking, you know, they're not taking a picture, and you're not storing your critical sensitive information. So what I'm basically saying is some of this stuff, when you're rolling it out, you have to educate your employees, because they'll push back saying they don't want to, or for whatever reason, because they have concerns about their private data, you know, and everybody should.
Is there a specific industry right now that you think needs cyber the most?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think you know, we've already alluded to it. I put most of these small to mid-sized business, you know, in that category, you know, regardless of vertical. But I would say that it's probably more prominent with the organizations where they may not consider it. You know, things like agriculture and critical infrastructure and smaller healthcare clinics. Those are ones that I think are becoming more targeted. Because they know that they affect supply chain, right, in some capacity, or or the health of the economy, or the health of individuals, right? So, so I think those are industries that definitely need to start waking up if they're not, and starting to put a plan in place. I have a friend who he's in the agriculture business. He runs. Is basically a farmer, right? And he has probably 40 to 50 people that work for or with him in some capacity, whether that's through direct employees or contractors, and they got hit with ransomware, and it locked out their entire system, right? And all of their employees could not do work, and they did not have that that backup plan in place, and it ended up costing them money to get that information back, right? And so and that's unfortunate, right? And I bring that up as not a knock on them. They definitely didn't just see it coming, right? And so ignorance cannot be bliss, and is not bliss in our sector. And so I think that putting those plans in place for those small to mid-sized businesses are important. Obviously, everybody needs cybersecurity these days. The attacks are only continuing to go down to the lowest common denominator, so to speak, from an organizational size and maturity perspective. The bigger organizations, they know their targets. They know that they built teams out already to do these things. So I think those smaller to the lower end on the mid-sized business organizations are really the ones that really need to start putting those plans in place and getting a good program in today, so that they can start identifying where their gaps might be.
Great, thank you. Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to ask you a little bit more personal questions, more directed at you. So since you started your business, what has been the goal of PlexTrac?
Yeah, so I mean, our mission is truly to empower and equip every security professional, regardless of size or team or company size, to really be able to identify and focus on the right work for them in their organization. So, we that have lived in the cybersecurity industry for a long time know that there's a lot of blinky lights. There's a lot of information being thrown at us. When you go buy tools like a SIM and an EDR and all these things, you can get alert fatigue and alert overload, and then you're supposed to be doing vulnerability management, scanning, and all these things, and so it gets very overwhelming very quickly, and there's always a shortage of talent, right? And so our mission is to truly help empower the talent that you have to do the right work and stay focused on doing the right things. So that's been the heart of the mission of PlexTrac, and the way that we do that is by really helping people take those proactive assessments, helping them track and trend how they're doing over time, and eliminating a lot of the friction when it comes to reporting and identifying risk and vulnerabilities and managing that in a central capacity. So that's our mission at PlexTrac, and that's why this is such a timely topic, is that our goal is really to help people get these plans in place, start doing those proactive assessments, and making sure that they can track and analyze the key risks in their environment, and not get distracted with the other things that will actually bog them down.
Any final thoughts, Dan?
I think what's interesting about the cybersecurity space is that we tend to end up talking about the same principles at the highest level, right? Is that having a plan in place, being proactive, identifying your gaps, putting policies and procedures in place. Those are all the core building blocks to having a secure and functional security program, and being able to provide more assurance to your stakeholders that you are secure and that you're getting the job done. But at that lower level, things are always changing, right? New attacks are coming out all the time. Vectors are coming out all the time. There's more things to keep track of and to be aware of, and it can feel very overwhelming. And so I think if there's one thing that I would just encourage people is, like, start with those fundamentals, right? And when at the end of the day, it largely comes down to process, and that's what helps keep you sane when, like, you hear about the next type of the next flavor of ransomware and whatnot, is like knowing, hey, I may not have known about this next flavor of ransomware, but here's how we address ransomware at a general level. And here's where we know we'll probably have the gaps that where we'll allow it to succeed, or where we'll first be able to detect it. Those are important principles to keep at the forefront, and that those are the things to stay focused on and not get overwhelmed with the ever-changing technology, and just know that that's always a part of the business. And then I also think, in bringing new people on, bringing whether they're consultants or employees, but bringing a new, fresh perspective is also healthy, right? And getting an idea of, it's okay to ask other people and other questions. Hey, what should I be doing? Where here's where we've been focused. Is how do we compare with other people in the environment?
Right.
So, yeah.
It keeps things interesting and gives you a new perspective for sure. Leo, did you have some final thoughts as well?
No, and actually that's something that I agree with. I mean, unfortunately, incidents, ransomware vulnerabilities, they're just, they are the natural order of doing business on the internet. If you want to get on the internet, it's just going to happen. One of the challenges that we have with our cybersecurity practices, ideally, we want to get ahead. We want to work with businesses before something happens to them, because it's much easier to prevent something ahead of time than to work with them after the fact. I mean, usually after the fact, it's very costly. It's as low as $50,000, and it can go up to several million. But unfortunately, what happens, it's kind of like I'll say it's kind of like insurance. A lot of people just don't believe they need insurance until that accident happens, and then afterwards they're like, "Oh, I should have bought insurance."
Right.
So
yeah.
for us, it's like we really try to get in front of it, try to help being proactive. But the reality is that, a lot of our customers that come to us, it really is after the fact. So a lot of it is just damage control, trying to reduce it for the next time it happens. And, again, I almost feel like we're a bad version of insurance here, because it's with cyber crime, it's going to happen. I mean, I'm not even going to say, it's just going to happen. If you want to get on the internet, if you want to deal with it, it's just the cost of business. So if you don't have a plan, then you're going to have a plan after it happens. Sorry, it's just a reality of it.
We are almost at an hour. I just wanted to thank you both for being here. Dan, it was great hearing from you and getting more of your perspective on things. And Leo, it's always great to have you. I love your stories. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We're happy to have been able to bring you this month-long series. And thank you again, Dan and Leo. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. Thanks for having me. Leo, great to chat with you again. So thanks a bunch.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.